We're almost piggybacking off of a rather interesting discussion we had last week about the Mary Sue, Gary Stu problem. If you haven't checked out that video yet, you really should. But this week we're talking about vices and how we need to get your hero one right away. Let's talk about how to make you an enabler. Before we get into that though, here's a reminder to check out dcferguson.com for all of my latest videos, overviews of my books, exclusive behind the scenes content for each of my series, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I should also mention that you can help me out in a big way. If you like this video, subscribe and share it with any friends that may also enjoy the art of storytelling. So let me riddle you this. What do Sherlock Holmes, House, Rick Sanchez, and my own Cora Blake have in common? If you guessed toxic behavior patterns, you're absolutely right. If you guess something else that's weird, actually, you're reaching. Stop it. Last week, we talked about the dangers of heroes being perfectly exceptional, always having the right answer, and never having to learn or grow as a result. What happens when we want to make use of heroes that are or become truly exceptional, though? Are we fated to be trapped with a Mary Sue in the end? Well, vices like addiction, promiscuity, thrill-seeking, conflict aversion, and commitment issues have a tendency to ground these characters and make them feel more human. It puts a stain on an otherwise exceptional person and makes them no better than the rest of us slobs. We've covered this many times, and psychology has studied the phenomenon. Audiences don't like perfect people. They reject them in some sort of uncanny valley, you're not human kind of way. To put a cynical point on it, you can't attract a general audience to a character unless there's something about them for the audience to judge themselves better than them. Sure, House is the greatest medical mind in the world, but he works in New Jersey, just isn't enough. It has to be that he's so brilliant that he's literally dysfunctional about everything else. If you knew him, you'd hate his guts, but if you were dying of a mystery ailment, he's the only one you'd ever want on your case. He pops pills with hopeless addiction. He's bitter and thorny, lacks compassion, enjoys petty revenge, and hates authority figures. With all that wrong, how did anyone enjoy watching this guy season after season? Well, if you were a fan of the show, the answer's obvious. He's a brilliant mind tackling bizarre problems in a medical procedural, and he's sometimes so abrasive that it's funny. He has a great cast of characters around him to bounce off of, and all of that conflict and mystery makes for satisfying stories. If we jog over to Sherlock Holmes, we actually see House's inspiration and a lot more of the same. He's cold and often abrasive. He self-medicates with substances that were legal in his time but are very much not legal anymore. He enjoys being so intelligent that it baffles the police, often coming off as arrogant. Watson is a natural foil, one of less intelligence than Holmes but still smart enough to be a worthy partner. He's the stand-in for us, the audience. Watson is us. We read alongside Holmes, understanding how he's right when he solves these cases, but unable to grasp how his mind worked to find that answer. He has to walk us through it and explain it to us. Then we realize that not only is he right, but there could have been no other answer. He sees the little details we don't. He is doing the original criminal procedural that will later spawn countless others, from Law and Order to CSI. What about Rick Sanchez, though? He's a cartoon character in a comedy. There's no procedural element here. Well, when we're not off on other worlds getting caught up in ridiculous and humorous scenarios, we're faced with a single truth. Rick would rather be out there in space and the multiverse than have a difficult conversation with his family about their relationship. For all of his intelligence possibly being the most intelligent human that ever lived, he can't figure out how to talk to his own daughter or tell his grandson that he loves him. Without this comedic and ironic element to his personality, he'd be a total prick. We wouldn't be able to stand him as a character. That's the rub with all of these characters so far. They're often so flawed and so hard to deal with, but so incredibly talented. If it wasn't for the saving grace of their flaws, they'd just be insufferable. They're always right and they're hard to get along with, and they never grow or learn or get to be wrong. That's even worse than a Mary Sue. At least the Mary Sue is written in a way that everyone in the universe loves them. What about when the character isn't hard to deal with? Well, we look at Cora Blake, the main character of the Dragon's Dream saga. In the great tradition of Luke Skywalker, Katniss Everdeen, and Neo, she is a chosen one in her universe. Over the course of her 8 books in the series, she gains almost limitless magic abilities and she develops regeneration. So she's incredibly strong and impossible to kill. That sure sounds like a Mary Sue, right? The thing is, Cora Blake has self-destructive substance abuse issues, difficulty coping with the loss of her father at a young age, and severe bonding problems. The few people she lets in and keeps close to her are a part of who she is, so that if they die, she dives into a bottle, into a bed, into familiar paths of self-destruction. This allows her to make mistakes and grow from them, perhaps someday tackling the demons in her life, but those are part of the trials, right? House doesn't stop being a curmudgeon just because he kicks the pills. The process for House to kick his pills, the process for Holmes to accept that Watson might be better suited for a particular case than he is, or that Rick needs to have a hard conversation, or that Cora needs to find a way to cope that doesn't involve a bottle of liquor. These are steps in the journey of the characters. Now, with that thought, we've covered substance abuse and numerous psychological issues that bring our lofty heroes back to Earth. But before you go giving your hero every destructive habit in the book, there are some vices you absolutely should not use. Those are reserved specifically for villains. The first and most important one is power ambitions. Not to be confused with your character striving to be the best in their class or otherwise exceptional at something that they're trying to do. No, we're talking specifically desires for power, the control over other people. Audiences absolutely do not like that. Why? Well, for the same reason that everybody hates politicians. People that strive for power want to be able to make their own rules, not agree to social contracts. They are inevitably corrupt to some degree or another, either because they get some kind of a thrill from the power that they wield over others, or because it gives them privilege to do what they want without the care of law or consequence. Basically, the most idealized version of a politician that people have in their minds is one that doesn't want to be one, to give power to someone that doesn't want it. What's more, you've seen this in action. Walter White in Breaking Bad is one of the most fascinating characters to ever hit a screen, but there isn't a single person that could make a compelling argument that he was ever a hero. Sure, fans rooted for him, but for the love of the drama, not because they weren't aware of the fact that he is the villain of the show. As he carved out more power for himself, he only got more drunk on it, losing a piece of his soul every single time. The same thing is true of Kingpin and Daredevil. He's compelling, a joy to watch, but he's a menace. He's the last person you'd want to give power and influence to. He wants it too much. I absolutely adored Vincent D'Onofrio playing him, and he was a highlight of every season. But again, power ambitions are an immediate red flag that you're not dealing with a good person, even when they think they are. It really should go without saying, but recent shows and films make me wonder if we all have to collectively go back to storytelling 101. We don't give a flaw to our hero where they lack empathy or a conscience. There's a word for people that lack empathy. It's called a sociopath. Let's not make those people our heroes. People that have no conscience, nothing that stops them from committing whatever act they deem serves them best. Well, we have a word for that too. Those are psychopaths. We're pretty strictly in villain territory when a character has these traits. Now, does that mean that we should not use them? Well, of course not. We need psychos, and we need sociopaths, and villains on power trips in our stories. We just can't make these acceptable flaws of our heroes and expect audiences to buy in. What you might find really interesting is that the reverse of this is true as well. If you give your villains a couple of compelling, redeeming qualities or so-called good traits, you actually make a more believable villain. But that's a whole other video I'm sure I've talked about already. I don't know. There's 110 of these things on the channel. I like to talk. Go watch another one when we're done here. Back to the topic at hand, though. Now we understand why it's a good reason to have these flaws in our heroes, and we understand which ones we should and shouldn't use. The next question is, when should we apply this thinking? Does every story need a basket case for a hero? No, not at all. Sometimes it's enough that the hero is exceptionally innocent, or that the trials ahead are harsh and cruel. Or maybe, like Sunny here, it's guilt that's carrying your hero through the story and making the best of an impossible situation. In these kinds of stories, the hero can stand on their own virtue because the odds that are against them are completely unfair. They got dealt a bad hand, and part of their trials is to keep their head held high. So again, when do we want to use this? I like looking at it like a sliding scale. As we move up in the level of exceptionality that a character has, the depth of their flaws increases. If you're trying to humanize a godlike character by saying that they sometimes forget to wash their hands after using the bathroom, that's just not good enough. Using this scale, we see that there is nothing physically, magically, or otherwise fantastical about Frodo, except his heart. He has the heart to see his quest through to the end. He's at the bottom of the scale. There's no need for major flaws because he's not particularly exceptional. Somewhere in the middle of this scale is our man John McClane from Die Hard. He's stubborn, has a fraught relationship with his wife, he's bad at communication, and he doesn't like people telling him what to do. That's pretty average baggage that most of us can relate to. He gets to stumble around in elevator shafts and walk on broken glass while he tries to save his wife from terrorists as the only cop in the building. Not super exceptional, but definitely above average, so he has average baggage. All the way at the tippy top, we've got our House, we've got our Holmes, Cora Blake, Rick Sanchez, all these characters of 1 in a billion exceptionality. Rightfully, they're all basket cases with deep flaws and issues, substance abuse problems, and character problems that push others away. Properly understanding this scale is a good way to put just the right amount of maladjusted into your characters and make them feel that much more real. It's also the key to understanding how much is needed to offset the great power we give our heroes. Too little power and too much wrong with them, and they become dysfunctional. Too much power and too little wrong with them, they go full Superman on us. And as much as I love him, the biggest problem with Superman is you can only have one. Flaws are to be embraced. Sure, our characters might need therapy before the story starts, and they're definitely going to need it after, but that makes them lovable. We can imagine ourselves, the deeply flawed beings that we are, trying to navigate the world with incredible powers and great responsibility. We'd like to imagine that we'll do the right thing. Stories give us a window to the human soul and say, yeah, you can overcome. Don't forget to check out my new website, the link's in the description below. You'll also find the link to my newsletter in the comments where you can get a free book, read about all of my latest projects, and find other indie authors for your next great read. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear about new videos, and as always, have fun and get crafting.